Thank you for tuning in to the MacroView Television. This is the Taiwan Outlook, and I'm your host, Wu Ruiguo. Many people often wonder what will happen to China after the rapid economic growth. Will there be more likelihood of democracy? Will there be more freedom? Will there be more respect for human rights? All those issues we will discuss today on our program with Professor Mingjue Zheng of the National Taiwan University to discuss those issues and much more. Professor Ming, welcome to the Taiwan Outlook.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. Thank you for inviting me to the show.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure, too.
We're going to start off with something very broad and general. I know that in the past 10 or 15 years, a persistent issue on the minds of many scholars and many analysts is the rapid growth of China, or the so-called the rise of China, especially in the economic domain. It's been growing at a double-digit growth rate for many years.
Right.
Yes, maybe this year it will drop down to 8% if they're lucky, and but in general, that is still very remarkable. Can you give us a comprehensive overview of the Chinese rise to prominence, and what are some of the key numbers that we should be aware of? Please.
I guess we could look at the problem from several aspects. First is, of course, the economic aspect, as you just mentioned.
Exactly.
And the social aspect, the social change and social transformation and things like that. And the third aspect would be the political aspect, namely you just mentioned the likelihood of democracy, more respect for human rights and things like that. And one last aspect that comes to my mind is perhaps the diplomatic aspect.
Okay.
How they play the role of international power or a greater power, or as you mentioned, they may want to play a bigger role in international politics and things like that. So basically, as I see it, for the so-called the rise of China, we can look at the issue from 4 different aspects. I guess you want me to talk about the economic aspect.
Yes.
All 4 of them, but let's start with the economic one.
First
one is, of course, the very impressive economic growth for the several decades, actually. Starting in late 1970s, when Deng Xiaoping just announced the coming of the reforms, people were wondered about it. People wondered what kind of achievement they could get, and what kind of reforms he had in his mind. But nobody actually knew it.
Nobody actually knew.
Right. I remember I was a graduate student back then, and I was observing with very keen interest. And I told myself, wow, this is something big. I'm witnessing something historical, or perhaps historic, something really big. So after 30 years of development, we can say that they've been arguing for themselves. I mean, the mainland Chinese people. They said that it's possible and it's quite likely for us to keep this kind of a growth rate, namely a growth rate of annual increase of 6 to 10% for another perhaps 10, 20, or even 30 years. That's very amazing, right? Yes, it's very, very impressive. So there are several reasons to support that. First is it's a big country, and they developed like a ladder, like the coastal area, and then the central area, and then the western part. So it's like a ladder, and one ladder up and one ladder up. So that's their design. That's their strategic design.
Okay.
And second is in relation to that kind of development, there's a gigantic labor market. So they say we're going to hire those people, and portion after portion and after portion, so that people would become rich gradually, or become well-to-do gradually. Rather.
Over time, yes.
Over time, yes. And also because of their entrance into the international market, and the drive of the international force, the force of the international market will push them to develop even further. So they're quite optimistic about the whole thing in terms of economic development. And there's one more thing I want to add to the list I've already mentioned, is that the interest, the international interest in the Chinese market, namely they want to make money too.
Yes.
They see a booming market and say, wow, why don't I come in and grab my basket of the gold? So they want to come in here. So I guess those are the reasons that they may contribute to this kind of development.
Okay.
So people are quite optimistic, and people, at least they're quite wishful.
Yes.
That's the economic aspect.
Okay. But one thing we noticed that, especially since this year's financial tsunami, that China, of course, compared with others, are in much better shape. But the fact of the matter remains is now people look into the Chinese mainland market, not so much as only a world factory, but also a world market. So we have seen earlier this year, the government announced, the Chinese government announced the 4 trillion renminbi stimulus package. Try to stimulate domestic spending and try to use the domestic demand, making it a world market to try to help itself endure the financial tsunami. Would you think that transition from the world factory into the world market will be a difficult one, or is it going to be a smooth ride for China?
I'm not sure whether it's going to be a smooth ride or not, but I see both positive factors and negative factors.
Okay.
I see both sides, actually.
Yes.
I guess no one in the world could say for sure that what's going to happen there.
Yes.
Let's give some figures.
Okay.
There are about 1.3 to 1.4 billion people in China now. And people notice that their annual income has been growing rapidly. But it seems to me that it's not everybody's getting better.
No.
No, but we're going to talk about that later. But let me point to one specific figure.
Please.
How many people are getting better?
Okay.
Are getting well-to-do for the past 30 years?
What's the percentage of that?
About 7%, 7 to 8%.
That's top of the pyramid.
Top of the pyramid, yes, exactly. So that's less than 10%. Still, that's a huge figure. We're talking about 100 million people who are improving their life rapidly for the past 30 years. These are the well-to-do people.
Okay.
These are the people, they got extra money to spend.
Of course.
They can spend more than food. They could do much better in recreation and even sightseeing and touring abroad, even touring to Taiwan.
Yes.
So these are the people we're seeing here in Taiwan and around the world who have the money to spend and who could become easily to what you just referred to, the consumer part, the market part, not the factory part.
Okay.
It's a small percentage in terms of the total population, but still it's a big figure in itself.
Okay. And two things, Professor Ming, that you mentioned. First, as the transition continues from the world market, world factory into the world market, there's a problem with the issue of labor. Okay. More and more people probably going to find themselves out of work. What would be the resolution or the remedy for that? And the second issue is there are so many uncertainties regarding the future of the world economy, even though many people believe that the worst part is over. But nobody really knows that for sure. So given that, against such a background, how does the Beijing government really look at this transition for itself from moving into a world market? Does it really think the private and public spending and also the investment is enough to stimulate China to grow, as the government official projection of 8% this year in 2009?
That would be tough, for sure.
I would think that would be a difficult task.
The most optimistic figure I have seen so far is probably somewhere around 7 some point percent.
Exactly.
7.2 or something. So reaching 8 would be a very challenging task. I'm not sure they can do it, but they're not sure either. So there are several things contained in the question you just raised. The first thing is the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate in China or in the Chinese society has long been underestimated. But it's not the same idea, the same concept that we observe in other countries, especially in the Western industrialized countries. For the Western industrialized countries or societies, unemployment would be a major thing, would be very serious and would cause social turmoil or social unrest and things like that. But in China, it's like, it's just getting a little bit above the subsistence economy. So meaning that if you have a good job, you have a regular paid job, and that's good for you. But you have an irregular, underpaid job, perhaps you can get by. And for some people, even if you don't get a job, but you get a piece of land, you may still probably be able to get by. So that's the idea.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is we may have to be very cautious about using the figures, try to compare the figures of China to other societies.
Other parts
of the world, yes.
Yeah, okay.
But still, there are some signs that we have to pay special attention to. What I'm saying is the unemployment problem is rising, and the government, the Chinese government, is paying much attention to it, and they've been summoning their local cadres to Beijing and try to give them extra lessons for that. So far as I know, they have summoned like police chiefs and judges, local judges,
and the economic officials?
And the prosecutors, the local prosecutors to Beijing, for the purpose of, they think they're dealing with a very hard and very difficult year, namely 2009 and 2010. What they're saying is, we are undergoing the impact of economic tsunami, or financial tsunami, that's hitting the world, and it's going to affect China sooner or later, so we got to be prepared. So they knew in advance that something's going to happen.
Yeah, it's clear from Professor Ming's comments that the Chinese authorities are paying attention to the social inequality or the income disparity that's happening in China. That's the byproduct of its rapid economic growth. And what would be those social problems that China needs to confront in the years ahead? We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back to the Taiwan Outlook, and we'll continue this conversation with Professor Ming Juzhen of the National Taiwan University. We'll be right back.